The first thing to do for Prime Minister Stolypin was to restore order through his new powers. On July the 11th, he dispatched administrative telegrams to all governors. "We are fighting not against society, but against its enemies. Open revolt should be strongly resisted. Revolutionary plans should be persecuted by all legal means. The undertaken measures should be perfectly thought out. Therefore, wholesome repressions can't be approved. Actions, illegal and careless, leading to fury instead of peace, are unacceptable." Stolypin ordered arrests and remote exiles for unrest masterminders to prevent uprising. At once, a number of oppositional newspapers and clubs were closed. During the entire July and early August, Pyotr Stolypin fought against unrest quite effectively and kept seeking opportunities to form a new cabinet in that way so it could cooperate with the Duma. Meanwhile, the strengthened law enforcement measures yielded results. Open resistance got weaker, but terrorists became more active. Stolypin also received people in his ministerial country state on the Aptikarsky Island, where his family lived. On August 12, 1906, approximately at 2:30 p.m., a carriage approached the premises. 3 men with briefcases, 2 of them clad in gendarme uniform, went out and headed to a crowded reception hall. That day, the same as every Saturday, Prime Minister received visitors without appointments and without checking any IDs. Allegedly, something in the visitors' clothes seemed suspicious to General Alexander Zamyatnin, Stolypin's adjutant. Having understood that they will not be led further, terrorists dropped briefcases with bombs. As a result, 30 people were killed and 100 wounded in a powerful blast. Stolypin's 3-year-old son Arkady was shell-shocked and broke a hip. His daughter Natalia was also shell-shocked and had complicated fractures of both feet. Doctors insisted on amputation, but Stolypin persuaded them not to hurry. It took them a lot of effort and risk to save Natalia's feet, but she needed 2 more years of treatment to get back to normal life. Prime Minister himself wasn't hurt, which the Emperor called a miracle. Shortly after the accident, the Emperor invited Stolypin to move to the Winter Palace, which stood empty. The blast, which was targeted at the Prime Minister, on the contrary, strengthened his position. Stolypin's personal example in the minute of the attack and amazing self-control, when afterwards he didn't change his daily schedule at all, led to a drastic change in the attitude towards him at court, society, and the entire Council of Ministers. Under the constitution, urgent laws could be passed by the imperial decree between the convocations of the State Duma. Knowing this, Stolypin passed a law entitling war tribunals to adopt swift and tough verdicts in case of robberies, murders, and terrorism. And the main thing was the adoption and immediate implementation of laws which were the core of the agrarian reform. Now let's adduce only one assessment of these events by Stolypin's enemy, little known at that time, Vladimir Ulyanov-Lenin. If Stolypin's policy stays long, the bona fide Marxists will directly and openly throw away any agrarian program, as after the solution of the agrarian issue Stolypin-wise, there can be no other revolution capable of radically changing the economic living conditions of the peasants. Elections to the Second Duma passed in line with the amended law on elections. Nevertheless, the new Duma's makeup appeared even less suitable for productive work than the first one. However, the election results appeared to be beyond even the most pessimistic expectations. Right-wing parties and moderate factions close to them took the 5th part of the Duma seats. The Constitutional Democrats had approximately the same amount of seats. Socialists numbered for over 2/5. Such a Duma couldn't work efficiently and lasted for about 3 months. Alongside with a decree on its dissolution, a new law on elections was published. Unrest, which was expected to follow, didn't happen. It meant that the first Russian Revolution was suppressed. On November the 1st, the Third State Duma began its work in the Tauride Palace. It was an absolutely different Duma. Thanks to the new law, its makeup made for a functional work. All the planned sessions took place in this Duma, and it worked for a full term of 5 years. On November the 16th, Stolypin addressed the Duma with a declaration outlining the government's goals and means to achieve them, and emphasized the essence of legislative proposals. This session of the Duma took place in the crowded hall. All boxes of diplomatic corps, MPs and ministerial, members of the State Council and senator seats were taken. Seats for public were not enough to accommodate everyone, as too many people came understanding the significance of the event. In a laconic and comprehensive message by the government, the Premier gave direct answers to the most burning questions about the existing political system and about land. The central thought of the present government, its guiding idea, has always been the land management issue. Not hazard land distribution, not coming unrest by handouts. Unrest could be suppressed only by force, but the recognition of inviolability of private property and, as a consequence, the creation of small holding, granting peasants rights to quit the commune and solving the issues of the improved land use. These are the goals whose implementation the government considered and is considering essential for Russia's existence. This speech by the head of the government became quite an event for Russia. It was much written and spoken about. Another incident of that day was also in focus. Constitutional Democrat Rodichev, who lost temper during his poor performance, in anger compared Stolypin's necktie to a gallow rope. This open insult of the Prime Minister caused a real indignation, and Stolypin demanded satisfaction. Crushed, Rodichev had to make public apologies, and Stolypin agreed to accept them. This episode once again shows that the Third Duma wasn't pocket at all. However, Stolypin believed that this Duma would pass his agrarian bills. Paragraph by paragraph analysis of the project took him nearly 17 months. On April the 24th, 1909, the Stolypin law was adopted by the majority of the Duma, except Social Democrats, Labourists, Constitutional Democrats and a number of right politicians. In 1908, premonition of revolution disappeared. Relative peace, which was restored in the country, provided for resuming visits by foreign royals. In late May 1908, the King of Great Britain, Edward VII, with his spouse, arrived in Revel, today's capital of Estonia, Tallinn. Now, this event was in the center of the media attention, so today we have unique film chronicles of the visit. For the first time, Prime Minister Pyotr Stolypin was caught on a camera. The meeting between the monarchs took place on May the 28th at the HMY Victoria, an Albert Royal yacht. During the meeting, Edward VII wanted to meet with Stolypin. They were introduced to each other, and the English king had a long talk with the Russian Prime Minister. Manifestation of such special attention of Edward VII to Stolypin should have caused jealousy of the emperor, and especially the empress. Probably that was the moment when Nicholas II started to distance himself from Stolypin. Prime Minister's straightforwardness and stubbornness never pleased the court or top officials. And if at that time of unrest the need of Stolypin was unquestionable, making his foes conceal, now everything changed. Foreign policy was perhaps the only sphere untouched by the Prime Minister for a while. In January 1908, Austria's decision to construct a railway from Bosnia and Herzegovina through Macedonia to link it with the Turkish branch caused indignation of the Russian society. Then, for the first time, Stolypin interfered, clearly and firmly formulating his negative stance on any Russia's step which can trigger a war. A war, he considered, is a direct path to revolution. In October 1908, Austria-Hungary declared the annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in March 1909, Germany actually issued an ultimatum to Russia: the recognition of the annexation or a war. Despite public uproar, the Council of Ministers, in many respects thanks to Stolypin's firm stance, adopted a resolution on poor war readiness, and Nicholas II confirmed his consent to Kaiser Wilhelm II to acknowledge the annexation. Russia's national reputation was seriously hit. However, Stolypin saw no tragedy in this. Success in foreign policy, he thought, results from a country's internal strength. Just 4 years later, a German governmental commission traveled across Russia, inspecting the results of the agrarian reforms. The main conclusion of the commission was that no country will survive a war against Russia when the reforms are finished. That spring saw the first ministerial crisis in Russia. Pyotr Stolypin fell ill with a serious pneumonia and, under the emperor's proposal, went to Livadia for treatment and rest. Taking advantage of the situation, far-right politicians from the State Council unleashed an offensive on Stolypin. A pretext was a bill on the staff of the Navy General Staff. The majority of military issues were the prerogative of the emperor. Considering the bill as a violation of the highest prerogatives, the Rights fanned a scandal. When Pyotr Stolypin came back from the resort, he found Nicholas II still hesitant about the project, and the Navy Minister, who had put a project forward to the Duma, ready to resign. Stolypin was also ready to quit, however Nicholas II didn't let him go. The bill, however, wasn't approved by Nicholas II, thereby he actually supported the attacks of far rights. On June 4, 1909, the emperors of Russia and Germany met in the Finnish Skerries on the Imperial Yacht Standard. The royals discussed European coalitions, but the talks didn't bring any significant results. However, Wilhelm II was extremely pleased with meeting Stolypin. When having breakfast on the Imperial Yacht, Pyotr Stolypin was seated at the right hand of the Kaiser. They had an extensive talk that left Wilhelm II very happy. On a survived photo of the meeting, we can see the Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna seated at the left of Wilhelm II, but the Kaiser didn't pay any attention to her, which was noted by everyone. Stolypin again caused malicious envy of crème de la crème. In late June of the same 1909, Russia saw large-scale celebrations marking the 200th anniversary of the Poltava victory. These festivities were to demonstrate a reviving power of the Russian Empire, whose citizens greeted his emperor with the usual enthusiasm. Film chronicles give us an idea of magnificent grandeur of the Poltava celebrations. Pyotr Stolypin prepared a nice surprise for Nicholas II. Having violated a formal part of the ceremony, he brought the emperor to a specially constructed camp, where he was awaited by district administrators from the neighboring provinces. Nicholas II found himself in the environment that he loved, and to displeasure of his circle of nobility, spent about 2 hours talking to peasants. By that time, the closeness of another former peasant to Nicholas II became a national problem. Stolypin was informed about Rasputin a long time ago, but showed no interest in him. However, a moment came when this information was impossible to ignore. The chief of the security office reported Stolypin about Khlist Rasputin, member of Khlisti religious sect, who, according to Siberian gendarmes, was involved in thefts and debauchery. Moscow agents reported about his visits to brothels and relations with prostitutes. Rasputin's closeness to the imperial family triggered gossip which negatively affected its reputation, especially the image of the empress. Rumor had it that Grishka Rasputin ruled Russia. These rumors were well grounded. Rasputin gained considerable power by that time. He found support mainly with the Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna, as she always took the side of the Tobolsk adventurer, who has become in fact a doctor for the young prince and the family's spiritual mentor. Stolypin tried to warn the emperor several times and persuaded him to change his opinion on Rasputin's impact on the imperial image. However, explanations only complicated relationship with the emperor. Once Nicholas II said a famous phrase, "I'd rather have 10 Rasputins than one hysteria of the empress." Anyway, Stolypin put pressure on Rasputin. Twice, this pressure forced the adventurer to leave Petersburg for remote wanderings. Most likely, it was the reason that the empress had bad impressions about Prime Minister. Between July the 3rd and July the 5th, 1910, Riga saw celebrations marking the 200th anniversary of the Livland Governorate joining the Russian Empire. The entire imperial family attended the event. The Prime Minister, in line with the protocol, had to follow the emperor. The opening and consecration of a monument to Peter the Great was the culmination of celebrations. Looking at a monument to the reformer, Stolypin involuntarily asked himself what he achieved after 4 years at the helm. He combated unrest mostly with tactics rather than force. From the very beginning, Stolypin was convinced that the police measures alone are not enough to suppress the revolution, and began to shatter poverty and lawlessness upon which revolution rests. And 90 million peasants, who finally become citizens, began to awake. Stolypin managed to launch mechanism which would have slowly put Russia on its both feet, if only he had had at least 15 years more. Stolypin understood and used to say that the reform needs years to be implemented, but he had a chance to feel happiness of seeing its first results. In August 1910, Stolypin, together with his colleague, the Minister of Agriculture Krivoshein, went for a month-long trip through Moscow, the Volga region, steppes, to Siberia. All movement and air of the Siberian steppes were the highest bliss for Stolypin. It was even greater than any decorations ever given to him by the emperor or honors from the Russian people. These happy months, without security guards, he had a chance to see how his work in the government translated into the development of the great nation on the vast territories. These people were sustained with their labor, free and distant from revolutionary troublemaking, and as they sincerely swore their allegiance to the Tsar and Orthodoxy, asked for churches and schools. Russia transferred to a new place, gave rise to a reborn purified country. In the Zavorozhye, Stolypin met a former rebel peasant, the member of the First Duma, now a passionate farmer and order lover. Stolypin returned to the capital full of new ideas and confident that his chosen course was right. The trip also contributed to amending a strategy of exploring the eastern territories. On September the 21st, 1910, Pyotr Stolypin entered the history books as the first ever prime minister who flew an airplane. During preparations for an aeronautics show in St. Petersburg, Stolypin was examining a Farman biplane and got acquainted with its pilot, Lev Matseyevich, who was notorious for his revolutionary past and, according to some information, was a member of the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Suddenly, the pilot, defiantly looking directly in Stolypin's eyes, suggested that the head of the government and he should fly the plane together. Stolypin already suffered stenocardia attacks, besides was well informed about Matseyevich's political preferences. Nevertheless, without second thoughts, he accepted the proposal. We can imagine how Stolypin felt in a strange machine which was thrown from side to side with a pilot whose intentions were not clear. However, he controlled himself till the end of the flight. Such a risky deed was typical of Stolypin, who cared about his honor and dignity. All dangers of the then air flights could be seen after Matseyevich crashed 3 days later flying the same airplane, having become the first victim of a plane crash in Russia. Already in January 1910, the government put forward to the Duma a law on establishing zemstva in the Western Territories. Peculiar national and class structure of that territories made it controllable only by the government-appointed zemstva, though the elective zemstva was more efficient. Stolypin, being an expert on these provinces, was personally engaged in the project and and found it extremely significant. Almost all land-owning nobility in the Western Territories were Poles, and a new system was to counterbalance this domination. The bill was aimed at separating election congresses and assemblies into two national-based branches, so that a non-Polish branch could choose more Zemstva members. Besides, the elected Zemstva should have mainly comprised property owners and thus ensure its trustworthiness. A well-thought project with a few amendments was approved by the Duma, and in June, the State Council began to consider it. It didn't hurry with the consideration, which promised to be easy. Actually, the project was chosen as a pretext for a new attack on Stolypin. The right-wing oppositional leaders unexpectedly launched a hidden campaign against the bill among their fellow MPs. A member of the council, Durnavo, composed a special note for Nicholas II to ground his position and forwarded it to the emperor through another opposition leader, Alexander Trepov. The emperor, without having discussed the issue with the prime minister, answered, "Vote as your conscience tells you," in fact, having supported the plot. Though the position of the bill's opponents had some reasonable grounds, their work was disguised in a form of intrigue. A proposal to vote down a governmental bill wasn't openly discussed in the sessions. Members of the council were talked into voting against it behind the scenes. They put a stake at the unexpectedness of the blow. As a result, on March 4, 1911, the State Council, with 92 fors and 68 againsts, approved an amendment which abolished ethnic subdivisions of the territories, thus depriving the bill of its sense. Stolypin perceived the bill's failure in the State Council as a personal insult and on the next day sent a resignation letter to Nicholas II. Stolypin explained his request by impossibility of his further work, if the State Council, being in fact a semi-government, will be for the reasons of personal hostility and intrigues, hampering the most important initiatives of the government. The situation was resolved through personal interference of the Empress Maria Fyodorovna, who has convinced her son to support Stolypin's stance. On the fourth day after submission of the application, Stolypin, who already considered himself dismissed, was summoned to Gatchina, to Maria Fyodorovna's estate. In the most touching and warm words, the Empress persuaded Stolypin to consent when the Emperor asks him to take his resignation letter back. Maria Fyodorovna's words were filled with warmth and gratitude to the Prime Minister for his efforts and devotion to the Emperor. Sincere words of the Empress touched Stolypin. He promised to take them into account. Having returned from Maria Fyodorovna, Stolypin indeed received a letter from Nicholas II, an extensive message on 16 pages where the Emperor almost confessed to Pyotr Stolypin. The letter ended in a request to take back the resignation letter and to come to Tsarskoye Selo. On the next day, they met and explained themselves. The Emperor said that he considers Stolypin's resignation impossible as there is nobody to replace him, and asked what decision will suit him. Stolypin's answer has been talked about for over a century. His famous dignity and honor, together with confidence in his rightness, didn't allow the Prime Minister to act in a different way. He set very harsh conditions to the Emperor: to dismiss the Duma and the State Council for some days, to adopt the law while the Duma is dismissed, to sack Durnavo and Trepov. Nicholas II accepted them all, and Stolypin left to inform his ministers on the news. But he was not excited at all, and everyone perceived this situation as the beginning of the end. Maria Fyodorovna said the following words to the Minister of Finance, Vladimir Kakovtsov: "If Stolypin continues to stand his ground, I have no tiny doubt that the Emperor will concede. It will take the Emperor long to overcome the burden of a decision that he will make under the pressure of circumstances. I don't see anything good ahead. I'm almost sure that now poor Stolypin will win, but this victory will not last long, and we will soon see him retired, which is a shame both for the Emperor and for the entire Russia." On March the 11th, an imperial edict about suspending the work of legislative institutions from March the 12th to March the 15th was issued. On March the 14th, the law was adopted by the imperial edict. the emperor also ordered Durnovo and Trepov to take a sick leave and not to participate in the state council sessions up to 1912. The Duma, the state council, the public and the media were outraged. Stolypin was especially surprised with Duma's reaction. Stolypin made a serious mistake. He underestimated the Duma, didn't realize that for the Duma, the Western Zemstvo and Zemstvo in general, districts and the peasantry and national interests meant nothing. Its only goal was to revenge for a series of defeats they took from him. Stolypin understood his temporary term in the power even before taking the help. Having created a perfect basis for possible successes, he understood how the reform should be continued. The spring crisis, which nearly overthrew him, prompted Stolypin to reconsider a lot of things. Stolypin clearly saw that one more plot will lead to his oust if the emperor doesn't do this earlier. Thus, he needed to be quick. He found it possible to spend the summer formulating a new program of the state reorganization and on its basis, in September, to pass new bills reinforcing the reform. Stolypin spent the entire summer on the project, and everybody remembered that he was very sorry that he had to drop work due to a trip to Kiev. Under the obligatory diplomatic protocol, the Prime Minister had to visit the celebrations held in Kiev in the presence of the Emperor to open a monument to Alexander II, the Emperor's grandfather. These celebrations were arranged not in a typical way. Responsibility for everything, including security, was taken by St. Petersburg officials. The Kiev Governor General Fyodor Trepov, having found out about this decision, intended to resign until Stolypin calmed him down. Since Stolypin's very arrival in the evening of August the 27th, the event's organizers wanted the Prime Minister to see their negligence. He had no security or personal carriage. On the 28th of August, Stolypin spent the whole day going to official events in a hired carriage. Having learned about this, Mayor Dyakov sent him his own carriage. On the 29th, the imperial family was solemnly greeted. In the evening of September the 1st, Rimsky-Korsakov's tale of the Tsar Sultan was to be shown at the Kiev Opera Theatre in the presence of the Emperor. Agent of the secret police Bagrov informed the authorities about plans to assassinate the Prime Minister. He was a member of a surveillance group that violated all instructions to identify terrorists if they appear. In the second intermission, Bagrov approached Stolypin, who was standing by the orchestra pit, and shot twice. One of the bullets penetrated the badge of the Order of Saint Vladimir on the breast of the Prime Minister. Pyotr Stolypin died on September the 5th, 1911. On September the 9th, 1911, Pyotr Stolypin was buried in the refectory church in the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. In a year, a monument to Pyotr Stolypin was opened in a square near the city Duma. to Pyotr Arkadyevich Stolypin from Russian people. Who was behind a little man Bagrov? No versions have been proven, and now it is not that important. It is clear that he was guided by a powerful force. The same force led the Stolypin's monument destroyers in March 1917. The same force guided the executors of the royal family in 1918. It was hatred. Pyotr Stolypin was a statesman who created things and left much behind. He didn't feel hatred towards his opponents, even to terrorists. He saw evil in them and fought against that evil, and believed in God.